Well, when Terry was reading this passage again from Job, I immediately went back to one of my favorite childhood movies, Aladdin. I remember when Aladdin was trying to trick the genie into getting him out of the cave for free. He said, I don't know if you can do this. We'll just have to get out on our own. And he's puts his foot in front of him and says, excuse me, are you looking at me? Did you rub my lamp? Did you wake me up? Did you bring me out of here? And all of a sudden you're walking out of me? I don't think so, mister. You're getting your wishes, so sit down. It's okay. Things are good. Girl, you're a good girl. Much as I think Job got a very raw deal in my understanding of how God relates to humanity, after all, God and Satan, as I said a couple weeks ago, were basically playing dice with whether or not Job would actually remain faithful to God, because Satan took everything from Job except his life. I mean, he was sitting in an ash heap in boils. His family had been killed off. His livestock had been taken. There was pretty much nothing left. And his three friends, being super helpful, come along and, like anyone who's trying to make sense of something and at a time that they just don't understand how to think outside of what they know, kept telling him, Job, you must have done something. You would not incur this much wrath if you hadn't done something. But he hadn't. And he said, I still hold true to my story. God, I'm not going to curse you, but you've got some explaining to do. And instead of God coming down and owning up to these things, God goes, were you there when I created? Oh, surely you know how all this worked. No, please, just tell me. No, for God, me forbid that I should know better than you how this all works. And gives Job everything back, but not really everything, but a new of everything. Thanks. Again, as I said a couple of weeks ago, the beauty of the story of Job is not so much that it gives us a very amazing picture of God, but it challenges that notion that if you do good, God will bless you. If you do bad, God will curse you. Because bad things do happen to good people, and good things do happen to bad people. It also ties in well with the fact that James and John were the kind of people that you don't normally like very much in a church. Because they're the ones that come in, they're from a wealthy background, they've got a lot of power and privilege, and so they come in and say, teacher, we want you to do anything we ask. And I like Jesus' very diplomatic way of addressing that arrogance and saying, okay, what do you want to ask of me? Like, we want to sit on your right hand and your left hand when you come into your glory. We want to be in charge. And he's like, bless your hearts. You just don't know what you're asking. Because if you're going to follow me, it's not going to be like Rome. It's not going to be like Persia or Greece or any of the other empires that came through. This is not for you to go, all right, we have been oppressed, now we're going to crush and we're going to have that power ourselves. We're going to do to them what was done to us. No. We're going to endure what they're doing to us, challenging what they're doing to us from a standpoint of love and service and compassion. In the words of Proverbs, we're going to heap burning coals on top of their heads. We're not going to do the same thing because then we become them. We are going to do the opposite of what they do, allowing for their human dignity, while still showing them that we also have it, and that God is bigger than all of us. Not sure how well that went over. And I admit, I'm a little sympathetic to the other 10, who are like, yo, we were here before you. Who do you think you are? Have you ever been one of the 10?
Yeah.
Have you ever been one of the 2?
Probably. Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. So, did Job or James and John get what they expected when they encountered their lived experience of God? No,
No.
not at all. Not at all. Job was probably thinking, awesome, I'm taking care of my family, I'm honoring God, life is great. And everything goes to pot. James and John have thought, okay, we found God's anointed ruler to liberate us from oppressors. We want that power. And they demand it for Jesus. And instead they get, well, let's revisit this a little bit here. If you really think that you want to be in charge here, you're going to have to let go of your desire to be in charge here. Mm-hmm. The paradox of the kingdom of heaven. I also like, and the reason why, if you are a stickler for the technical lectionary, you may have noticed that the psalm we chose today was not this week's reading. The reason I did that was because I wanted to bring in a thematically appropriate psalm to our discussion. Sort of taking a page out of Zwingli's book of, instead of doing lectionary preaching, doing what we call expository preaching, which means preaching on a theme we don't normally do in the Episcopal Church because we stick to the lectionary, which has great benefits and some challenges, especially when life is giving us a topic that we need to address together that the lectionary does not touch on. Well, Psalm 139, without looking, off the top of your head, what is the gist of Psalm 139? It's okay if you don't remember. I'm just curious if something jumped out at you.
It really seems to me that song is somebody acknowledging that God has created them from atoms, from the very beginning, and knows them, knows all of their life, what it's going to be, and when they're born, God already knows what their life is going to be.
Mm-hmm. So the intimate, complete knowledge that God has of this individual, of every individual for that matter. So even if we aren't aware of God or what God is leading us to, God is aware of us and where we are going. So in a way, more often than not, we are surprised by a lived experience of God. One of the stories that I go back to a lot in my own life was when the book of Job was first introduced to me when I was in a suicidal depression as a teenager. And I was yelling at God. I was cursing God. There were words coming out of my mouth that should not be repeated here in church to God. And my friends were freaked because they didn't know what to do with that. And yet, I am a priest. My understanding of God at that time was after youth camp, where they get you literally high on God. They do all these fun activities, and you don't get a lot of sleep. You're around a lot of other teenagers your age, and a lot of fun activities. Kind of cool. Like, I really enjoyed going to the camp, but the older I get, the more I realize the drawbacks of that kind of approach. But that's where I really got into, okay, God, we're going to do this Jesus thing. And I thought, now that I'm faithful to God, my life's going to be awesome. Because they made it like, God is going to bless your life. You're going to have everything you need. Now that you have salvation in God, you're here. Everybody yell, yay! It's okay, Heidi. And then my grandmother died. My grandfather showed a few choice aspects of himself that were challenging. And Mom was having kidney stones, but we didn't know it for a while. And then just life got hard. Got really hard. Things that I didn't know about that were going on around me, I was picking up on energetically. And it made it hard. And I was like, where are you, God? What are you doing? But what's neat about that experience is that was when I first really began to wrestle with my understanding of God. And oddly enough, for all the times that I got the blank stares when I asked my big theological questions, why does suffering exist? Why does evil exist? If God's all loving, why are there people dying and hurting? There was one teacher at Youth VBS in the Southern Baptist Church that said, you're doing it right. Your faith is growing. And that was a key moment for me to recognize that these questions were not taking me away from God. they were leading me further into God. But it's in these conflicts, it's in these times where we collide with things that challenge who we are. That's where I've found consistently in my life where I most find God. And it's what I do in those moments of conflict that make or break my ability to more deeply understand God. That combined with a practice of what we call mindfulness, trying to pay attention in every moment. Okay, if God searches me and knows me everywhere, I should probably be searching and trying to know God too. Which you can't quantify, you can't datify, and it's really hard to know ever what's really going on, which is very frustrating because it's kind of the ultimate, but it's really hard to know how that works. And so that's where I like this idea of the continual aspect of God is in relationships. God is found most in the way that we interact with one another, with God, with nature, with the world around us. And so, if we are to follow God and God's calling in our lives, paying attention to where God is in our lives is a paramount spiritual practice that we need to hold on to. And unlike James and John, we should not expect that we're going to have high places of honor in the sense of the corruption of medieval clergy. We should expect challenges and the reality that I am not called to lord over you as your priest. I am called to serve you. And the bishop is not called to lord over me. He is called to serve all of us. And so on, etc., etc. So, inescapably, our relationship to God is tied with our lived experience of God. And that's today's discussion question, which we're going to explore more in depth together in small discussion.
Can we do it in this small discussion?
Yeah. In fact, we'll turn the Zoom camera this way and deal with that. So take a minute. Think about, there's many angles you can take with this question. What is your lived experience of God? It can be key moments in your life where you experience God. It can be day-to-day how you experience God. Or moments of great transformation where you experience the reality of God. But I'm going to end the sermon here and ask you to take some time in silence and ponder the question, ready to share your story, not your ideology, your story, and listen deeply to the stories of others about how we find our lived experience of God. Amen.